Well, hello. Thanks for coming back to check out another video. So I am super excited to sit down and film this video. And so in all of my excitement, I am stumbling over some words, but if you have been here for a long time, that is not news to you. Haley does tend to stumble over her words a lot. So either way, what is all the excitement for? You can probably tell by the title of this video. It's a Pan That Palette introduction. Okay, so as I'm filming this, about 2 weeks ago, I did post a, hey, I'm thinking of trying to pan a palette. So if you missed that, I will leave that link down below just so that you can go check it out and you can see the contenders that were in this video. Because I did bring like a variety of different palettes that I was like considering and thinking about. And I do greatly appreciate everyone's input in on that video. It really helped a lot in order to kind of narrow my focus, I guess, on like what was important to me, what I did want to, achieve through panning a palette. So in saying all of that, kind of where my head has been at since we last spoke about Pan That Palette in that video, I really want to do Pan That Palette because, let me put it to you this way, when I finally finished off the Balm How About Them Apples palette, and I had 6 empty shiny pans of cream blush that I knew I had finished from start to finish, it was just such an amazing feeling. And I know that sounds so weird because it's just makeup at the end of the day, but it was such a sense of like accomplishment. So I can only imagine that by finishing a palette to completion, that accomplishment, that like proudness that goes with it is going to be tenfold. So that's kind of like my main goal. Also, I just really want to pan a palette. I really enjoy watching other people pan a palette. I love cheering them on and things like that. And I'm ready. I'm ready to actually pan a palette from start to finish. So in saying all of that, I am not giving myself a 1-year time frame like a lot of people do. If you can pan a palette in a year, woo, my hat goes off to you. If you don't finish your palette in a year and you decide at the end of the year, like, I'm going to declutter this, I'm going to put this back in my collection, or whatever it is, like, I am still really proud of you and I am still cheering you on, because using something day in and day out for a year is still like a really big feat, Also with this, I want to actually, like I said, finish off every eyeshadow. I don't want to just hit pan in them. And again, if that is how you structure your Pan That Palette, my hat still goes off to you, because it does take a lot of effort to even just hit pan on an eyeshadow shade. I have also, in all of my ramblingness, kind of forgotten to mention that Pan That Palette was created by Amber F. I'm gonna always leave her linked in my description box just in case I continue to forget to give her credit, because we like to give credit where credit is due. So now that we have kind of like backtracked, we can front track and go back to talking about Pan That Palette. So either way, no time frame on this, and actually finish off every single little last scrap of powder product that is in the palette are kind of my two like main rules, we will say. So then the other thing that really helped me to make the decision, I had told you guys like, hey, I really want to make sure it's a palette that will hold my interest. So I wanted something that has color but has neutrals. And then quite a few people commented and they were like, don't get so hung up on that, because you can always bring things in. You can always bring in companion palettes to continue to make your Pan That Palette really fun and exciting. So I really did appreciate that comment, because I really needed to hear that. Like, that wasn't something I had even considered. Now, in saying that, I still did choose out of that grouping the palette that holds my heartstrings the most. And in saying that, I think that if you caught that video, it's very apparent which palette has a tug of my heartstrings that I feel the most creatively inspired by. There is just one palette out of that bunch where I really do feel like it is a great standalone palette. It is a great companion palette. It is a great colorful palette. It is a great neutral palette. It is a palette that I do not get bored of, and I'm always excited to pull it out. And I really do want to pan this particular palette, because you're gonna know what it is when I say this, but it is discontinued. And what does Haley do with her discontinued products? She puts them back, save it for a special occasion, and that's just silly. Like, if it is something that you truly love that much, you should just use it, right? Like, I'm not saying like you should pan it to completion like I'm gonna do, but don't like save it for that special occasion. Every day should be the special occasion. I have to remind myself of that constantly. So I know that you know what it is, but I got one more thing to say. I know a lot of people also commented like, why don't you work on your oldest palette? And again, I really see the merit in working on your oldest items, because hello, they are your oldest items. Powder products do expire too, as well as cream products. But when I pull out my older palettes, the ones that come to my mind are the Persona Identity 1, the ABH Jackie Ina, and I think that's it. Only those two come to mind. But either way, I still really do get a lot of enjoyment out of both of those palettes. However, when I use those palettes so consistently, I do get bored. I get creatively stunted. I don't like pairing them with other things. I don't know what it is about those two palettes. They are still favorites for me, and if you've been eyeing either of them, I think that you will love them and get a lot of enjoyment out of them, but they are just not palettes that I want to pan, if that makes sense. So that's kind of like where my head has been at these past 2-ish weeks, we will say. So without any further rambling, let's do a drum roll. Is that good enough? We are gonna pan the Kaleidos Club Nebula palette that Angelica Nyqvist did as her first collaboration palette with them. Now, I believe this palette launched in January of 2020, and that is when I picked mine up. I was lucky enough to get this on the first launch. I didn't have to wait for like a restock. So it is 2 years old at this point, well, a little over 2 years, because we are sitting in July 2022. So it does kind of like fall into that older side of things, you know. I know too, when I talked about this in the previous video, I said this probably is the heaviest of the palettes, but after I looked it up and saw the grams, it's actually only 13 grams of product. So I think what throws me off is the packaging of this. It's a very weighty package, and then also you can see like it's very boxy and bulky, you know. I don't ever really have trouble storing this, but that does kind of play into this decision process. Like, this would free up a lot of space to completely pan this palette. So again, I'm gonna open this up, but what I'm gonna do is insert a close-up clip for you guys, because I think the ring light is gonna wash this out a little too much. So we're gonna look at this, talk about some things. The last time you guys saw this palette, I told you, oh, I have 4 pans, and I still have those 4 pans. They didn't go anywhere, but I now have a new pan. So that is 5 total pans in this palette already. Now, one of those pans, the Cylon shade, which is the darker purple shadow, that is the only pan within this palette that I have that comes from actually putting this palette in a project pan. The other 4 pans of eyeshadow within this palette are from organic use. So that again just like makes me more confident in choosing this palette to pan it to completion, because obviously it's something that I really enjoy to reach for day in and day out. So the 4 other pans that I hit pretty organically are the Firefly shade, which is the lightest green shimmer, Queen of Blades, which is the darker matte green, Void, which is the darker matte blue, and I actually hit the pan of that today doing this eye look. And then I also have pan on the light taupey brown shade, which is Naru. I also have really good dips on some of these other shades. Like, I feel like I'm super close to hitting pan on the light matte blue shade, which is the 7 of 9 shade, as well as I have pretty good dips on the Nova and You're My Only Hope. Those are 2 of the shimmers within this palette. Another reason I greatly enjoy this palette is because a lot of the shimmer shadows in here can be worn alone, like a standalone lid shade, but they also make for really great topper shades, and they really transform different eyeshadows into different things. Obviously, that's what a topper shade would do. But again, I just feel like that makes this palette a little bit more creatively inspiring. So as far as underutilized shadows go within this palette, like ones that I could stand to use a bit more, would be probably just the 2 peachy shades, to be honest. So the matte peachy shade and then the Nebula, which is like the peachy shimmer shade, those are both really pretty, but as a whole, out of this palette, those are my 2 least used shades. And so it's kind of perfect because those do kind of scream summer, fall, and that's the season that we're in. Now again, I'm a person that says you wear whatever color you want in whatever season that you want, but there are certain colors that I attach to certain seasons, and so peachy orange shades are very like summery fall to me. So I'm kind of excited to start this now, and hopefully I can play around with both of these eyeshadows and really figure out good ways to wear them. So in saying all of that, I really think we are at a good starting point with already having 5 pans within this palette. I will say for the first month, because I'm going to update you guys on this project every month, for the first month, I don't want to set any goals. I just want to see what I'm naturally gravitating towards. I am going to keep track and tallies and tell you how many times I have used each shade within the month as we go forward. I think that that'll be really interesting, especially for like the shadows like the matte peachy shade and the Nebula shade, the shimmery peachy shade, because since those have been used so few times, you could basically say however many uses I get out of them is like an actual like start to finish usage tally, if that makes sense. Ooh, just blinded you with the mirror. Greatly apologize. But yeah, I'm super excited. If you can't tell, hopefully this goes up on July 1st, but I'm just going to start tracking my usages from now. I always leave my filming date in the description box, so double check there if you want the most accurate like information. But I think it's June 26th as I'm sitting here. So before we wrap this up, the only other thing that I want to say is a little shout out to Alex. We were talking in the comment section, we were talking about the Nabla Dreamy 2 palette as well as the Club Nebula palette. And together, we came together and decided, hello, these also make great companion palettes. So let me open up the Nabla Dreamy 2. I just want to show it to you guys. It's a really pretty palette. Again, it's probably washed out, so I'll insert a close-up clip. It's a really pretty palette. It's very much on the more neutral side, especially in comparison with the Club Nebula palette. However, I do see a lot of really fun color combinations that you can use. So I'm only bringing this up because with this Nabla Dreamy 2 palette, I'm gonna leave this out on my vanity, out on my desk. And anytime that I am feeling like creatively stunted, I will try to reach for this palette and pair it with Club Nebula. Now, I will also like pair Club Nebula with things that are in like Project Level Up or pan those eyeshadows. So it's gonna get a lot of use. But I just feel like this is something good to point out, kind of put out there that like, yeah, you know, this palette will be kind of like on the back burner, you know? So if I end up hitting any pans within the Nabla Dreamy 2 palette, I will update you on them in this project pan. I will try my best to keep usage, like track on this, but I don't know how well I'll be with that because like I said, this will be a back burner kind of palette. So in saying all of that, I do want to say one last thing. With Pan That Palette, this is going to take majority of my focus. Pan Those Eyeshadows and Project Level Up will be like secondary projects for me. But like I said, this palette, in my opinion, one is a great standalone palette, but also makes for a really good companion palette. So I don't think that in panning this palette, I will really be hindering myself within my other project pans that involve eyeshadows. I think I can still be really successful. Okay, deep breath. Haley is done rambling. So I appreciate all of your input in the I'm thinking of trying to pan a palette video. I appreciate all your input in this video. I hope you guys are just as excited to follow along with this as I am excited to do it. I hope you're having a good day, a good night, or a good whatever, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.